Okay, let's get started. So, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have a great discussion planned for today's ECONYL Academy, and we are so happy to have so many of you joining us live. We'll give everyone a few more minutes to log in and get settled before we start. In the meantime, I'd love to understand who we have in the audience. Actually, we have already interacted with some of you. So please write in the chat box who you are, whether you are a designer or a manufacturer, architect, wherever you are. Okay, Michael, designer, and Claire, architects, every interior designer, NCIDQ. Oh, great. This is a nice acronym. Interior designer, sustainability leader, Brett. Okay, so nice. I think we have the right audience, dear panelists. So, engineer at furniture manufacturer. Perfect. Mary is an architect. So let's move on. So it's wonderful to see such a diverse audience joining us from across the industry. I think that mix of perspectives is what will make today's conversation so valuable. So thank you, all of you, for being here. My name is Maria Giovanna, and I am Chief Communication Officer at Aquafilm. I've been with the company for nearly 20 years and have had the privilege of witnessing our transformation into a pioneer of circular materials. I'm honored to be your host for today's session, where we will explore together how manufacturers, architects, and designers can make sense of the growing amount of sustainability information available, and how clearer communication can help teams make more informed product decisions with confidence. I'm delighted to be joined by two leaders who are helping us to shape the future of responsible material specification. And here we have Asif Din, Director of Regenerative Design at Perkins&Will, and Tim Conway, President of Mindful Materials. So let's get started, guys. I have a question which is the same for the both of you, but still, it's a very interesting and icebreaker question. So, Asif and Tim, the question is the following. Could you give everyone a quick introduction and tell us what's one sustainability assumption you once believed that the data later proved wrong? So you were convinced about something, but afterwards the data told you, okay, guys, this is a different situation.
Right. I'm going to take you back a bit into history. And when I started architecture, effectively, there wasn't really sustainable design as such. It was more to do with energy efficiency. And once things started to progress, more and more factors have been put into effectively what the remit is of sustainable, regenerative, environmental processes. So I suppose when I first came across embodied carbon, I thought that was the be all and end all, and it isn't. So having a low carbon material does not mean it's a good material.
Yeah, you are right. You're right. And what about you, Tim?
So I would say that the further I get into this, when I came from a manufacturing background, the more questions that I got asked and the more I found out I couldn't unknow, right? I started to get questions about, is this product free of these chemicals of concern? And it started to get me thinking about, how do these choices affect human health and well-being? Or how do these products affect climate change? And I didn't know how to get there. But what's happened is our industry has created these certifications and these data points really to give me the information to let me know that we can do better, right? So the data just proved to me through these certifications that this challenge that we have, there's an opportunity for us to do better. So I think the data really, as you said, is there's one thing that it's kind of disproved is, I wouldn't say it's disproved, but it's given us the opportunity to optimize and do better.
But it is an enabler. Well, is it all right, Maria, if I start discussions?
Yes, it's an enabler. You are right. But there are so many data. And let's start the conversation, the
Okay.
real one,
All
the
right.
real one. Because there is today more sustainability data available than ever
Yeah.
before. So many, so different. And we are full of acronyms. We have LCAs, we have EPDs, carbon disclosure certifications, and countless reporting frameworks. And it's very crowded out there. So it's difficult also to decide, okay, is this correct for me or is that better for me? Oh, and then you have customers who are asking you, I need this, but I need that. And you have to apply to and make at least to try to meet the requirements of everybody. So many designers and manufacturers still struggle to translate all of that information into confident product decisions because I think enabling, as you were mentioning, Asif, is our
Mm.
keyword today because we have data, we have certifications, we have platform. How can we use them in order to let us make the right decision? I go right or I go left. So from your perspective, you're as a designer, Asif, and
Yeah.
you're as a manufacturer team or coming from those fields. So have we unintentionally made sustainability more complicated than it needs to be? And where do you see the biggest disconnect between the information being reported and the decisions being made? Tough question, I know.
Yeah.
I can start that.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ozzy.
Start, Tim. Huh?
So mindful materials exist to break down the complexity of all of this data and put it into an organized system that represents shared human values. So as I think about manufacturers and design professionals, how we work together, I think maybe one of the challenges that we've had is that we lead with the data. And then we have products that have an EPD with a GWP and an HPD with no red list and a C2C with these type of VOCs. Oh my gosh, that's so heavy. What Mindful Materials does is organize that into what we call the common material framework. These 5 buckets that represent human health and well-being, climate health, circular economy. So I think uh, data informs people, but stories move people. And the Mindful Materials organization, broken down into these categories of shared human values, is helping us to get to the storyline first and then follow it up with the end of the story with the data and the certification acronyms that enable us and empower us. Ozzy, your thoughts?
Yeah. I think it starts with effectively the vision for a project. Like most projects are, let's say, different in some sort of ways, but the priorities are different. There are a range of different data points out there. There are a range of different levels of emphasis. But it's important that we start projects and actually talk to the client about what's important to them and which ones we should prioritize over others. So we have an internal weighting system. To say that all parts of certification or all tests are exactly the same weighting would be wrong. What we need to do is that we are actually we're designing the marking system we're going to be marked against. Mindful Materials helps us to do that because it coagulates that data. But data is just data. It's not information. You can look at a bus timetable. That's data. The bus you're going to catch, that's information. And in exactly the same way, if you have the data available, you still need to know how you're going to extract the information from it.
Okay, that's great. That's great. And maybe, Tim, can you explain us a little bit better how the mindful materials works? I mean, if I am a manufacturer or if I
Mm-hmm.
am a designer, how can I approach mindful materials? What's in for me?
What's in it for me? So if I'm a manufacturer and we have spent all of this money to get the data on these products, whether it be just indoor air quality or transparency, here's my ingredients, or here is my ingredients that are assessed against some type of list. or we've even gone even further and we've optimized this product to give you the information that these things are important to your project, right? Important to how you choose these materials. And then you have design professionals who in the real world live in a rationed billable hours, deadline centric project, and they may specify 250 different materials. Do they have the time to research all of those materials and find out which acronyms fit my values or this project client's needs? I don't believe we're going to get very far in that path. Mindful Materials is here to organize and to assess all of those different acronyms that fit into material health, fit into climate health. So for manufacturers, it's helping them to simplify the complexity of how they come to market, to justify the investments they've made in those materials. It's a tool that allows design professionals to find materials that fit their values around human health, climate health, without having to dive into the chemistry and the parts per million. So we've come together to create this common material framework, but we've done it collectively throughout our industry. Mindful Materials is manufacturers, design professionals, owners, contractors that have helped to define what simplicity can be and what good looks like.
So we could describe it as a shared language for product sustainability. So it's a common language for everybody, a simplified one that people can rely on. Because at least from my understanding, when you have a project, you have so many materials, so many requests, and as if I see he is confirming.
Yeah.
So it's important to have a place where things are much more simplified. Information can be found easily, and people have the idea, okay, I have these 5 or whatever, let's say, fields already in place in this, let's call it library, although it's not a library, but it's, a platform. And this makes my life easier. This is the reality.
Yeah. Maria, that's a great description. I wish I could do it as well as you just did.
Okay. And what's your perspective, Asif, on this topic?
Well, it's sort of like it's really, really useful to have that library, and unfortunately, in a sort of like in terms of, sort of like we have a range of products available, and Mindful Materials is growing in Europe as well as the US, but in terms of my US colleagues, I'm slightly envious because they have such a larger library to deal with. So they can look at a range of different materials. While in Europe, it's only part of the market, quite honestly. So, and it's growing, and that's good, but it's only part of the picture. So sometimes I still got to do the hard legwork, and
Okay.
it requires me to fill in some of those gaps.
And Maria,
Okay.
can I jump in on this too? Right. So manufacturers like Perkins&Will, you have a library, and Gensler has a library, and I saw
Yeah,
Brent from Indianapolis. Ratio has a library. In the past, manufacturers have had to adapt and react to all the different library standards all over the country, all over the world. At least they're asking. That's good. But what if every design firm used this common material framework to define what was their library, what they chose to select? And that's why we exist, is not just to work on with a couple libraries, but we want to gift the common material framework out to every library, every design owner. So what if we all worked off of the same common material framework, and Maria, to use your language, and developed a common material language? And that's where we're getting to right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming back to Asif, I have a curiosity actually, Asif.
okay,
Your job title, make me thinking. I mean, you are director of regenerative design.
yes,
That's a meaningful shift from the way most people think about sustainability, because
mm,
regenerative, it's a very important word definition in your job title. What
yes,
led you to this work, and how do you define regenerative design?
right, okay. Um, this is pretty much sort of like a dissatisfaction with the terms, essentially.
Mm,
In the past, sustainability was effectively making sure that you could sustain a system, make sure that it's enough to get by. We are now living in a degenerative system. We're on the decline. Sort of like we effectively, in terms of nature, in terms of materials, in terms of material health, in terms of the amount of chemicals. So it's no longer good enough to be sustainable. We got to be providing more. We got to be providing positive outcomes. And I suppose that's the crux of effectively what is regenerative, is providing positive outcomes. So,
yeah.
sort of like it's just one step on effectively from talking about in that sustainability type sense. It's saying that what are the positive outcomes I can create through a project, that I can create, within the projects that Perkins&Will actually do, to make sure that they are recognized, quantified. Some of those already happen. Some, we have fantastic designers, and it's the same with other design companies. There's always positive outcomes out of it, but it's how to maximize those.
Yeah, I think, it's a tricky situation because we love talking about negative things. We attract
Yes,
people with negative things, but it's much more difficult to talk about positive things because you don't have the same reactions, the same followers. It's much better to talk about negativity. But coming back to this very interesting explanation, much of the sustainability conversation today still focuses on reducing negative impacts. Regenerative design asks a different question. How
yeah,
can the built environment actively contribute to healthier ecosystem, communities, and futures?
yes. So that's more about not thinking about your project as in its by itself. We're part of a system, and how does our project or what we design as a jigsaw piece fit into that larger picture and provide not just positive impacts within that jigsaw piece, but within that whole jigsaw puzzle. So we're thinking about things beyond the red line boundary. We're thinking of things in the past, but also in the future as well. The time element is very, very important in terms of design, which is something that's been reasonably ignored. Sort of
Yeah.
like in terms of the, sort of like very much a linear economy or a linear sense of thinking. We get stuff, we put stuff together, and then it goes out the door. But that's not the case. We need to know where it's come from. We need to know how it's being used. How long is it going to be used? What impacts does it have? And then at the end of its life, how is it taken apart? How is it recycled? To make sure that we're thinking about the whole lifespan of all the materials that we're putting together to create a service, essentially, for building inhabitants.
So it's like changing our mindset because
Yes.
in linear economy, business as usual was done for centuries, as we are doing today, or it's a different approach, as you mentioned. Try to think with the end in mind. So these products, where will they end up when it's
Well,
finished?
sort of like we could go back even further in terms of sort of like indigenous design. Indigenous design always thought about time.
Okay.
And
when
you can go back to medieval times, and sort of like there was always a plan effectively to replace roof rafters or a thatch roof. There was always the planting happening at the same time as installation. We've just detached ourselves from that system, and we now have to reinvigorate that system so that we think about things and how things are then fit back into that jigsaw puzzle at a later stage.
Hey,
But do
Marie, I
you
think
think,
that's a
go,
great
go.
question because as you talked about Ozzy's title, regenerative, right? And I think it's a question that everybody that's in this webinar can ask themselves today. I say, how did you get into this work? Did it find you, or did you find it? Right? And I think one of the things is I think one thing we've called it sustainability in the past, and I think that's part of the problem. It's like if someone asks me how my marriage is with Katie, I'm like, well, it's really sustainable, right?
Yeah.
Or Are we just trying to do less bad? We're
Mm.
not. We're trying to do more good, right? And it's easy to come into this, as you said, to be a skeptic without a plan and to understand everything is bad. But how do we start to make these choices, right, that can be better, right? And when did we stop? When do we start designing like we were not indigenous to this place? But as you are on this webinar, maybe you have felt to say that there's only so much I can do, right? But you think about as a manufacturer, you don't own the materials when it goes into the building. And Ozzy at Perkins&Will, you don't own the materials that you specify. The only thing that we own are our choices. So what if we started to empower better and look at the choices that we made and place the value in health and climate? And just think about the choices of the people in this webinar right now. That's how we get this to scale, right? Is looking at
But
those choices and trying not to do less bad, but be regenerative.
that's a question of agency, and people always underestimate the amount of agency that they actually have as designers of any system, whether it's a manufacturing or whether it's as an architect or a designer. As has already been mentioned, sort of like any building is hundreds of materials. Each one of those has an impact, and each one of those has a choice. Either you specify it or you don't. But that is still worth hundreds of lives in terms of carbon impact, in terms of environmental impact. So coming to work and making your best decisions is far more impactful than anything that you would do privately in your life. You might, cycle to work. You might put solar panels on the roof of your house. You might do a range, you might give up meat. You might be a vegetarian. You might be vegan. All of that pales into insignificance compared to if you come to work and you choose the right materials.
Yeah, and how do you choose the right materials? Last time I checked, asking questions is free.
Yeah.
Right? Ask those questions, get into those conversations, manufacturer to designers to owners, ask those questions, but place those values around those common material framework buckets.
My wild guess is that in any case, some of the considerations that, owners or manufacturers or customers take into consideration is, yes, the right material, but also the price. Sometimes, or a lot of times, price makes the difference. And without thinking that maybe in the future, that kind of price would be somehow paid. Just, at the moment, you don't see it as an investment, but just as a cost. And
Oh,
sometimes it's very difficult.
no, absolutely. And we live in a very capitalist society. And everything does come down to, dollars and cents, pounds and
Yeah,
pence, whatever. But it's interesting that you actually said price as opposed to, money.
yeah,
And it's the same conversation that you could have about values. It's
Yep.
not economic value, it's values. And those values exist across a range of different sectors. So in some
absolutely.
sorts of ways, it's actually widening that conversation to say, what is the price of stuff? What is the value of stuff? As opposed to how much is it going to just cost me economically?
And what's the price for the environment? Because we have to take into consideration also this aspect,
Yeah,
always.
well, what's the price for the environment? What's the price for my employees, my inhabitants
Yeah,
of this
yeah,
building,
yeah,
of the workers that are putting are putting the stuff together, of the workers that are taking the stuff out. There's it's a wider picture, and
yeah.
it's not just economic value.
And
You are
Maria, you're
right.
right. Last time I checked, the budget's undefeated. Right? The answer to is money, but it goes back to values. And I
Yeah,
get the benefit now with Mindful Materials to work with so many amazing manufacturers, from large manufacturers to small manufacturers, that the delta between those materials and the status quo of the past, I don't believe it is what it once used to be.
There,
But
yeah,
there
when
are
we're when we're having this conversation with clients, if we lead with data, we're gonna, no one ever marched on Washington because of a spreadsheet or data, right? But why are we selecting these materials? Because we want to address the most important asset in your building, your people, your employees, your students, your patients. Why are we making these decisions? Because we want to eliminate the landfill consumption in your buildings, right? We want to start to make decisions based on the social responsibility and the lives that are affected and how that your building is designed. So if we lead with those shared human values defined by CMF, I think we get more owners on board with this work.
I think
Definitely.
we've all seen the graph effectively that the outlays for any business are salaries. The building pales into insignificance. That goes for energy bills, the property value, the build value over time. And unfortunately, it's a case of rubbish in, rubbish out. If you put rubbish into something, you're going to get rubbish out. And it's exactly the same with design. You put rubbish materials in, you'll end up with rubbish build materials out and harm to the people that you're paying the most of your capital outlay for a company to.
Yeah, yeah. I have now another questions because sometimes, I'm thinking, okay, I think that coming back to the metrics, so a more technical questions, let me have this one. Uh, Everybody talks and writes about CO2 emissions or GWP, so still connected to CO2 emissions and so on, which is great. I think that this concept is quite common and people, can understand it. But are we, forgetting or are we under evaluating other kind of metrics? I think about water. In my opinion, water is much more important or equally important as CO2 emissions. What's your opinion, the both of you, on this topic?
Tim, do you want to go first?
Yeah. The last thing we ever want to do, and that's why, again, why mindful materials exist, is we never want to put a design professional or manufacturer in conflict to say, I want to make this decision for climate, but sacrifice water or sacrifice health. The common material framework is holistic, that it addresses all 5 of these attributes. And I think that manufacturers are doing the work to address all of those, right? Ecosystem health is water to me, right? Not only a reduction in water intensity, but have you optimized your manufacturing process to address the effluent that you release out from manufacturing, right? Are you starting to be transparent in the supply chain of your raw materials to eliminate forced and enslaved labor? And by the way, it starts with with material health. If you don't have those ingredients in your product, they're not in your supply chain,
Mhm.
right? So I think that with common material framework, it's allowing our manufacturers to make choices, our design professionals, our owners to make choices in this holistic way to address all of these values and challenges that we face together.
I think this is a case of effectively education. There are a range of different metrics out there, but the common metrics still need to be understood rather than running towards certification and saying, right, I got this credit. I got a credit for, let's say, VOC. What does that do for your design? I don't know. I just got the credit. It's not about that. It's effectively saying, sort of like, I'm eliminating VOCs because of human health impact of the people inside my building. I am reducing the carbon because effectively is long-term climate change. I'm making sure that the timber I'm going to get is FSC because effectively, sort of like processes to do with forestry. It's partially that education that's also required. You can't just rely on a certification giving you the answers when you don't know what you're answering the question to, because there's plenty of gold stars out there, but
Yeah,
what are you getting the gold star for?
Ozzy, I always say that on the education, I agree with you. Are we chasing credits or are we chasing impacts? Are we chasing acronyms or are we chasing outcomes? We need to communicate it's 104 degrees where you're sitting in Europe today. That's an impact we need to address.
Yeah.
This is why we're making these choices. Sorry, I didn't speak in Celsius. I apologize.
We will
I,
excuse you.
yeah, but in any case, I think, it's a matter of going beyond data certifications or regulations. It's a matter of leadership. I think it's very important that our leaders somehow take informed but also visionary decisions, because everything should start at a certain level. Because if we are just be compliant with some requirements from the law, or because we have this certification so people can buy our products, it's just not a matter of a piece of paper, or okay, I have tick all my flags here and I'm fine because everything was done by the books. I do believe that our leadership somehow should change.
Yeah, but sort of like in some sorts of ways, if we're looking at sort of like regulations as a model, regulations takes a long time to actually happen. So to get that consensus and to get it put into law takes years and years. It is a very much more impactful and more exhibit, sort of like it's a speedier process if that actually comes from industry. Industry takes a stand in terms of leadership and basically says, this is important to us. We're going to eliminate this. We're going to get rid of this. We're going to minimize this. And this is the reason why. And that is more, the story is more impactful than a figure.
Yeah.
If we're waiting for current leadership at a high level to dig us out of the hole we've dug in, we don't have time. I heard you loud and clear.
Yeah.
I think we need to redefine who is a leader in anyone on this webinar. The leader is the person that raises their hand. Mindful Material started 12 years ago, right? We have members all over the world. Started 12 years ago because a librarian named Nancy Halsey raised her hand and said, I'm going to create a system for this at HKS Architects. One librarian raised her hand to create this program, and today it's being implemented all over the country, all over the world. So if you are a design professional today, raise your hand, ask those questions, right? Think about the impacts and the opportunities of these choices. So I think we're all leaders, right? Some of us just sit in different seats.
Yeah. And looking ahead, what gives you both optimism about where the industry is headed and the progress being made toward more thoughtful, informed, and transparent product selection? So there is something bright in our future, or are we still thinking in a negative way? Where the situation? How's the situation today?
I think in terms of real estate, in terms of the real estate industry, I think I've seen so much more appetite and curiosity, to take Tim's phrase, effectively of what materials they have and why they have them. Now, this is being played out effectively within circular economy field. We are doing a lot more projects with passporting. All right, it may not be, EU still hasn't come up with a standard passport for most products, but we're doing passporting of some description. Who do I need to contact once I no longer need this product? Is there a market available for it? How long is the warranty? How much runtime has it had? How many years left does it still have? And this is starting to become reasonably standard within clients, and they're trying to understand. So on the flip side, people are also saying, this goes back to the rubbish in, rubbish out. Where did this come from? Because that's going to inform how much it's going to be worth at the end of the day.
I'm most optimistic because of the collaboration that's happening amongst all the sectors in a project. Like even manufacturers that compete against each other are collaborating on health and all these certifications. And the A&D firms collaborating with manufacturers and amongst themselves to create this unified common material framework. Owners jumping on board as well. This is really, really confusing. It's hard, it's complex, but when you surround yourself with people that maybe are just as confused, it feels more collaborative. So I'm most optimistic because of the collaboration that's happening to get this forward. And you think about what were we asked 20 years ago just for recycled content? And then we started to want to get materials that might not have either PVC or PFAS or halogenated flame retardants. These are becoming a norm today. So like it or not, you're getting good, better materials. And that's happening because of collaboration. So I'm optimistic that the collaboration that's happening within our industry is helping all of us move forward.
I think the industry is heading in two directions effectively. There's people like us and people that are listening online that are actually getting more and more knowledgeable about this. We're getting more and more expertise about this because the field is no longer, going back to my point, it's no longer about energy efficiency. It's about a range of different things that actually go and impacts that go into a building or a built asset. But also the entry point, if you have access to any one of us, is that we can point to hotspots so much quicker. We can talk about, halogenated flame retardants. We can talk about heavy metals, solvents, design for disassembly, a range of different things. And we can look at projects and say, no, that's not as important. You should be concentrating on these things first. And I think that is a real cause for optimism because, as Tim says, the industry is much more transparent. I am more transparent as a person. I talk to our competitors all of the time because we all have that common goal. It's not going to be, sort of like a nil-sum game. It's sort of like, it's not, I'm going to win, everybody else is going to lose. We only win if all of us win together.
And if we don't, the stakes are pretty high altogether.
Yeah, in any case, together is the only way to go. You can't be a one-man show. Sustainability and circularity don't happen if you are a one-man show. It happens when people talk together and are actually collaborative together. Otherwise, you will miserably fail. No way. So before we get into the audience with the Q&A session, because we are almost done, this is my last question for you both. What advice would you give the audience to get started? So to be together or to do something that is really meaningful after our webinar?
I'm going to nick Tim's idea probably, and Tim's probably not going to hate me for it. But it's about being curious about where something has been and where something is going to go to. Just think about those two things, whether it's the cup that you pick up and you have your cup of tea, or whether it's the computer that you're sat in front of. Think about it. And that curiosity will lead you into some quite, sort of like interesting places.
Okay. And what about you, Tim?
Well, the easy button is join Mindful Materials. Sorry, I had to get that in. But in all reality, raise your hand. Raise your hand. And as you started getting into this work, we focus so much on what we want at the end that we ignore what our role is at the starting line, right? So where is my starting line as a manufacturer? Where is my starting line as a design professional? And how do I start to be curious and ask those questions, right? Because the choices we make today will determine those impacts, whether it be the amount of waste you're trying to eliminate, whether it be the human health impacts, is define what your starting line is and start to empower those choices to get to a better end.
Okay, great. Thank you. Great replies. So I think now we are ready for some questions, and I hope our guests will place some interesting questions because we have two great panelists here with us today. So please don't be shy and place some questions. Oh, here we have one. So Claire, let's read the question. There's a massive debate around carbon offsetting and claims like carbon neutral or even carbon positive. I found them a lot in any way. So what are your thoughts on offsets? Maybe a project could be carbon neutral or positive, but is it really possible for a company to achieve true carbon neutrality or even negative impacts?
You want to go first, Ozzy?
All right. Okay, I'll go first and I'll say no. Easy answer. It's just not possible. We breathe. We build stuff. We put things together. All of that requires carbon. To do an actual offset is what, sort of like paying somebody off to do something else somewhere else. And to a large degree, most offsets are complete rubbish because those things are going to actually happen anyway, or they're going to provide a benefit somewhere else down the line. There's double and triple accounting happening most of the times within these offsets. So the only true offsets are true carbon removals. Those are really expensive. And if you get a client that can do true carbon removals and you've done everything else that you could do within your project, then I'd say, yeah, give them the credit. But realistically, no.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen on an economic basis at the moment that anything is going to be carbon neutral or even carbon positive.
I agree that it's no. I agree that it's no. And I'm going to frame this response as a design professional having a conversation with a manufacturer, right? Carbon offsets are paying for our sins. Now, are they good or bad? You can buy carbon offsets at Dollar General, or you can get them at Whole Foods, right? What manufacturers are trying to do and why you're asking for EPDs is because it gives you the global warming potential, the carbon footprint of that choice. Now you have a measurable, right? And buying offsets doesn't change that number on a global potential. It just lets the manufacturer know how many offsets to buy, right? So, yeah, carbon offsets could fund what is a renewable energy project or some carbon sequestration program. Those are good, but it's not going to dig us out of the hole that we've dug ourselves into. So I want you to think about that choice you make and what is the carbon footprint of your project? What is the carbon footprint of the materials you've chose this year? What is the carbon footprint of your career? Right? So look at manufacturers that are doing that hard work to reduce the carbon footprint so that they maybe buy less offsets. Now, carbon positive, let's say you had a product that had a carbon footprint of 10, and maybe that manufacturer buys 12 offsets. Is that positive? Yeah, by marketing language it is. But really challenge those manufacturers to say, what are you doing to reduce that global warming potential? Yes, the offsets are nice, but that's what I want to focus on.
Okay. I have here another very interesting question, and I think it's specifically for Asif. The question is the following. We often tell people to start small with just one thing. Don't try to tackle all the materials or reduce all the impacts on your next project. So Asif, what are 1, 2, 3, so 1, 2, 3 material types that are most commonly specified in the highest volumes that you would recommend the viewers to start with?
Right. Okay. Well, this depends effectively what field you're in. If you're talking about architecture, then, sort of like if you're talking about architecture, then you're looking at basements first. You don't want to be digging stuff out of the ground for then to be filling half of it with concrete. So reduce your amount of basements. Also look at the form factor of your buildings. Also look at the intermediate floors if you're going anything above 10 stories. If you're talking about a corporate interiors project, then effectively you'll be looking at furniture first. What are your solutions for furniture? Because those are the things that effectively are churned the most, but also have the most amount of impact, environmental impact, because they're heavy. Quite a lot of them are made of metal and other bits and pieces. Secondly, you're looking at effectively what your floor's made of and then what your ceiling's made of. These are not hard things, and I'm sure whoever asked that question is it Laurel would say, "Oh, you're not telling me anything new," but sort of like quite often the simplest answers are the very ones that are the hardest to implement. So it's look and investigate those options first.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would say I'd say get good at this a little bit at a time. Look at the high volume materials and look for product categories that have the mature data and certifications available. So is it ceiling tile? Is it the drywall? Is it the flooring? You know, when you raise your hand, you work in a firm, you're going to need to get buy-in with everyone at your firm. Bring them in and get really good at this one product category at a time. That would be my advice.
I have another interesting question, which is probably more about textile, but also furniture, fast fashion, you know. So how can we make it more sustainable, especially when overconsumption, so this is another interesting concept, overconsumption and fast fashion have exploded in the last years.
How can we, you said in that question where you said, how can we make this more sustainable?
Yeah.
Right? Define who the we is. It's all of us, right? So let's look at furniture, let's look at flooring, let's look at us like manufacturers have to do the hard work, but if they make it, will they come? Like, will the design professionals specify this, Mira? When I think about circular economy and fast fashion, you think about waste. Whose role is it to make sure that that product is circular? Products are not circular until people create that in a system. So I think when I think about that, we is who what is everyone's role in that? Right? We all play a role in the choices of how it's made, the choices of how it's purchased, and the choices of what happens at the end of its time in service. We have to define those roles and we have to act on those roles.
I think this is slightly a question about robustness, market, and also material content. Now, in terms of robustness, effectively, when we talk about fast fashion, effectively, those materials are wasted and discarded before they reach the end of life, the end of their service life, as Tim said. So is there a secondary market? Is there somewhere else somebody else can use that rather than it being wasted? And it's that process of trying to eliminate waste. Now, in terms of the material content, having a homogeneous material content, you know, sort of like something that is completely one material means that it's more likely to be recycled than if it's a hybrid blend of a range of different materials and trying to extract those. But at the end of the day, it's the job of us all as consumers to actually look at things and actually think about, again, lifespan of things, as opposed to thinking about things just for the occasion. And fast fashion is a very good example of buying something for an occasion.
Yeah, we're in a system right now where we just transfer the liability from the consumer over to the ecosystem, to the planet. I just got back from NeoCon and I was really, really excited to see all of these furniture manufacturers with displays that had tools and repair sections. It's about reuse. That's only gonna succeed if there's a supplier and a buyer. Who's going to specify the reuse into the next space? That's someone's role, right? The manufacturer can do it, but we need that market signal to say, yes, this is going to be a new norm.
Yeah. I have a last question. So for Tim, actually. So love what Tim said about connecting sustainability to human values. Are there any good examples of who is doing this exceptionally well at the moment?
Well, for 31 years, I worked for a manufacturer and tried to, at Shaw, and tried to coach that with how we came to market. And my new role at Mindful Materials is how do we develop this CMF? How do we feed this into tech platforms? How do we feed it into libraries? And we're going to work really, really hard to develop these programs. And I always say, and some of my peers are on, it's like once we have completed that 5 or 7 year task, the easy part is behind us. Now we have to develop people. And that's the direction that we want to go with Mindful Materials in the future is how do we help manufacturers tell storylines before bottom lines? How do we help design professionals take that vision board and communicate those values to the client meeting? How do GCs start to tell these stories as well? So I wish I had more examples. That's something we want to work on at Mindful Materials moving forward.
Great. So I think we are almost done, and what a wonderful discussion we had today. I'd like to thank both Asif and Tim for sharing their perspectives and expertise with us today, and thank all of you for joining us and contributing to the discussion. We hope today's conversation provided some new ideas and practical insights that you can take back to your own work. If you found this discussion valuable, please share the recording with the colleagues and peers who may benefit from the conversation. The more we can learn from one another, the more progress we can make together as an industry. And this is just one of many conversations. Through the ECONYL Academy, we are committed to bringing together thought leaders from across the design and manufacturing community to explore the topics shaping the future of our industry. We have more webinars, interviews, and educational content planned, so we hope you will continue to join us. Thank you again for spending part of your day with us. We appreciate your time and we look forward to seeing you at the next ECONYL Academy. Have a wonderful day. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank
Thanks
you.
a lot. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Bye, bye, bye.